we're ready to go.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 19th of July. I'd like to start with introductions. First of all, my name's Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of Administrators. And on the screen, I can see Mr. Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
And Mr. Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
So that makes the panel of administrators for the City of Casey. We're also joined this afternoon by our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Glenn Patterson. And we have a number of senior staff here with us this afternoon. For a range of reasons, we have a council meeting that is both virtual and actual this afternoon. So there's just a little bit of a delay, so we hope that you can work with us with that. I'd like to open and welcome everyone and state the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities, and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal peoples as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community history. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, happy and rewarding lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I move to item 2, the confirmation of minutes, and there are 3 sets of minutes to be confirmed this afternoon. I'll state each of the minutes and then seek a mover and seconder for the total 3 meetings. So the first meeting was for the council meeting held on the 21st of June 2022. Then the special council meeting held on the 28th of June 2022 and a special council meeting held on the 12th of July 2022. Is there a mover and a seconder to confirm the 3 dates of the minutes of the meetings?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
Chair, I'm happy to second the minutes, noting that I was an apology for the 12th of July meeting.
Certainly, we will note that. Can I put that to the vote? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 3 is declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under section 130 of the Local Government Act 2022 and do not have any conflicts relevant to the agenda papers today to declare. Do any of my colleague administrators or officers have any conflicts to declare?
Chair, I have no conflict to declare, but a personal declaration to make with the confidential item.
Okay, we'll note that at that time. Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Cameron, nothing to declare?
Chair, I have considered my position and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you, noted, and no officers have made any declarations. Item 4 is public question time, and there's 1 public question submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's council meeting. And the submitter is Simone Isons, and the subject matter is home care. And Ms. Ison's question is as follows. Council's home cleaning services stopped during the first COVID lockdown. Recipients were told they wouldn't lose access to these services. However, when attempting to resume services, my mother was told she was no longer eligible because services had stopped for more than 12 months, even though this was not her choice, and that council is no longer providing these services. A friend of my mother was told the same thing. Is council still providing these services? If not, why not? If they are, why have people eligible prior to the pandemic been denied access? Council services are important for people who aren't eligible for other services like NDIS or My Aged Care. Thank you, Ms. Isons, for your question, and I have asked our manager, Connected Communities, to attempt to make contact directly with you, so that's in train. But in the interim, in response to your question, I can confirm the following, that since the 1st of July this year, 2022, a number of council's aged and disability services previously provided by council have transferred to new providers following agreement with the Commonwealth Government. And this is part of the multitude of changes being made by the Commonwealth Government with respect to the way that aged care services are provided. So the shift from council provided services follows a review of council's aged and disability services and a decision in December 21 to proactively exit aged care services in response to both Commonwealth and state reforms of aged care. The Commonwealth Government appointed MyCare, Mequa Care and Uniting Aged Well to deliver home and community care to the City of Casey's residents. Council will continue to provide 3 of its aged and disability services, including meals, community transport and volunteer transport. And can I say that the staff of the City of Casey have done an enormous amount of work to ensure a smooth transition to the new service model. And so it's disappointing to hear, Ms. Isons, of your particular experience. But as I indicated, Mr. Callum Patty, our manager, Connected Communities, his team will be trying to make contact with you and see if you can be further assisted for your mother to access the services that she previously accessed. So thank you for your question and for bringing that to the attention of council. I now move to officer reports, and there are 7 reports this afternoon. And 1 confidential matter. So the first item on our agenda this afternoon is item 5.1, the Gender Equity and Family Violence Prevention Strategy. Do I have a mover for that report?
Yes, I'll move that report.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconder, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. Chair, tonight I move that Council adopts a safe and equal gender equality and prevention of violence against women 2022 to 2032 strategic plan. And I am happy to move this motion, noting that Council is playing its role in the ongoing cause of eradicating family violence and violence against women, and taking positive steps to ensure that Council is putting its best foot forward in demonstrating our commitment to this important issue. The document that I'm moving tonight is being created through the work of council officers. It's an important document, and the best way to describe the work that this document seeks to achieve is through the strategies that it seeks to achieve, and in particular the goals that it seeks to achieve. And if I can very quickly take the community through those, the goals that it seeks to achieve are the following. People are not constrained by gender stereotypes and social norms. Women and diverse genders are independent and actively engaged in all spheres of decision making. Organisations, institutions and public places are safe, fair and equitable. Men and boys develop healthier masculinities and positive peer relationships, and positive, equal and respectful relationships are strengthened. I am mindful that in moving this motion, we are moving a document that adopts very specific and particular language, which in my view is appropriate language to use in this important topic. It's inclusive language, and it's language that, in my view, is appropriate for a community like Casey to be aware of and to use in a document such as this important council document. So with those comments and noting that council is playing its role and setting a 10-year strategy, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank Mr Belmar for his comprehensive comments. I'm pleased to second the adoption of the Safe and Equal Casey Gender Equity and Prevention of Violence Against Women 2022-2032 strategic plan. Mr Belmar has articulated the principles and the goals that the plan is seeking to address, and I note that through the lens that there is currently the fourth action plan of the National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Children, where there was a further $328 million announced by the Commonwealth Government on the 5th of March 2019, and this plan is seeking to capitalise on the additional principles and goals of the National Plan, but very much in a localised Casey sense. And the reason why this plan is critical in a local Casey sense is that it is acknowledged that there are some pockets within the municipality that have significant socioeconomic disadvantage and additional cultural challenges which do limit to some extent the availability of such programs and initiatives as this against those communities. And whilst the National Plan has a broad-based whole of country approach to looking at ways to mitigate violence against all genders and partners in domestic settings, and particularly against children, it is quite fundamental within the National Plan that localised approaches have to be considered and enacted for the greatest amount of impact. It is also noted that there are a number of studies from both the ABS and also from the Australian Safety Strategy that domestic violence against men, sadly, is increasing. That does not in any way limit the importance of and the priority of focusing against women and children and doing all we possibly can as an organisation to prevent measures in a domestic context against women and children. But it also is noticed that men are not immune from being victims in this very terrible situation. So I do acknowledge the work that's been done in putting the strategy together. I do acknowledge that there is a very much a localised context to the strategy, which will hopefully have a greater impact in achieving against the success factors. And I thank council officers for the work they've done in identifying these issues and having very honest conversations with the community to address a situation, not just in Casey, but nationally, that is terrible and must be addressed with the utmost priority and resources.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I just wanted to add a few comments and confirm my strong support for this report and the strategy and the actions that follow from it. I commend the work of officers in providing the leadership on this and the important role that the council can play in providing community leadership on these issues. We have a very high level, in particular, of family violence within the City of Casey, and council have been strong advocates for those issues in the past in ensuring that members of our community can access important services that support the experience that many people, largely women, experience with family violence. But I do also support the comments made by Mr Boardman with respect to the issues that men also face in terms of violence in relationships, and that is also reflected in the work that council has undertaken. So with those comments, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.2 is Activity Centre Revitalisation and the Bunjil Place Precinct, Narre Warren. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move the recommendation as put, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, thank you very much. This is a matter of particular focus for ourselves as administrators, and whilst the report and the recommendation is focusing on the Bunjil, we also acknowledge that there are major revitalisation initiatives currently underway at the Cranbourne Community Hospital site, which is a state government initiative, and one which, as a panel of administrators, we have discussed numerous times in the past. There is further initiatives at the Narre Warren Village. We are going to be looking at the Cranbourne major activities planning scheme amendment later in this meeting, and also within this report is the Berwick Major Activity Centre. But I do want to talk about Bunjil specifically in a brief context, Chair, because not only is it the home of the council, but it is the largest activity centre within the Fountain Gate Narre Warren region. And one which we have acknowledged requires further attention to make it be friendly, approachable, useful, and to be consistent with the objectives within the Council Plan 21-25, our infrastructure plan, and our economic development strategy, also 21-25. It has been our emphasis to place significant consideration on revitalisation and investment attraction. We do have further goals around high quality design, leveraging private partnerships, particularly from the property community, around providing the best balance of opportunities for the community, both commercial, recreational, and other civic minded. And these are specifically target efforts to meet those objectives and to try and create sustainability and longevity within the municipality, and to have that overarching goal of no disadvantagement to any members or any part of the municipality accordingly. Specifically in regards to Bunjil Place, Chair, this report is proposing the sale and development of 5 hectares of land nestled between where the council meeting is being held currently at Bunjil Place and the Fountain Gate Shopping Centre. And that is going to be used primarily for at-grade car parking and for passive open space, but to provide much more connectivity between the two facilities. And it's one, as I said, Chair, that ourselves administrators have been thoroughly briefed on, has taken a very heightened level of interest to ensure that all of the aspects around the connectivity principles and the use of the land to best meet community expectations are considered, and one that we will have a very much an ongoing interest in, certainly for the duration and beyond of our tenure. Community engagement is critical to this because it is such a significant part of the municipality. There is a community consultation plan that is currently being developed specifically for the Bunjil Place Precinct project, and that will be a key feature of the concept master plan. We have seen some elements of the concept plan. There are some exciting potential proposals that we will look forward to talking about in future council meetings. But with the recommendation as put and the emphasis on revitalisation of the precincts that I have mentioned, I do strongly support the recommendation. I look forward to ongoing and significant community engagement to make sure that the facilities meet the expectations of all users and members of the community. And if I can conclude once again by saying, Chair, it is a significant priority for us as administrators, and one that we will be taking a very keen interest in, and I look forward to making further reports in the future on these specific issues. Very pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the comments of Mr. Boardman, I support this motion, and I support the project, and asking the community for its input as to how this 5 hectare site can be best developed. Certainly the use that it has at the moment is not necessarily its ultimate best use in the long run, in the long term, and it is vital that the community be involved in an important, the phrase used in the report is an important city shaping project, and that's absolutely what it will be. We are at the heart really of what is the City of Casey here, and I look forward to being further briefed, receiving further reports about this project, noting that what we are embarking upon is really some important long-term strategic planning with a focus on the future of the site, and on the future of how this important asset to the City of Casey will be used in the long term. And with those comments, and noting that we are really embarking on a process, I endorse the words of Mr Boardman that it is important to this panel to ensure that, or to me as a member of this panel, and I know the panel, to ensure that that these briefings, this project, considers all options available for the site and considers the best future for the site. And with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and thank you both for your detailed comments. As outlined, this is really whilst there's been a lot of work done and a lot of thought and planning, thinking, it's important to note that this is the beginning of the process and there is much yet to be achieved. So it is a very exciting project for the City of Casey and one that does require some considerable thought into the future. With that, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3, endorsement of revised governance rules for public exhibition period. In some ways, this is a procedural motion. It invites the consultation process on some opportunities within the Local Government Act. So I'll put that to the room and seek a mover.
Yes, I move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your opening comments that this is really a procedural motion, but an important procedural motion because it does introduce the possibility of permanent changes to the way that councils run their business and that regional library corporations run their business with respect to how they conduct meetings. The motion I'm moving tonight, as it's set out in the notice papers, notes the revised changes to the governance rules, endorses the revised governance rules to be placed on public exhibition for a period of 4 weeks, and resolves to schedule a special council meeting on Tuesday the 30th of August for the purposes of adopting the revised governance rules. Like any good procedural motion, this has what seems to be a reasonably perfunctory title of the Regulatory Legislation Amendment (Reform) Act of 2022, but ultimately what this will allow is for meetings such as the one we're engaged in tonight to continue to occur beyond the COVID period. I am pleased to move this motion and to invite the community to be involved in discussions, because what it will mean is that in future we'll be able to conduct meetings in circumstances like those as we're doing now, and ensure that all members of the community can be involved, that council laws in future can be in different places, and to ensure that good governance can utilise the technology that's available to us. There are many disbenefits from the COVID period. This perhaps is a benefit that we've had to learn how to use technology, and I'm happy to endorse this motion to ensure that we can continue to do so in future. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, very brief comments. Mr Belmar has articulated the process as an adjunct to your opening comments. There is, I guess, a degree of coincidence that we are passing a recommendation to put on public exhibition these proposed amended rules in an environment where we are conducting virtual meeting through either health or geographic aspects. And that is an important feature of the governance rules. It must be stated, though, Chair, that our absolute starting position with regards to the conduct of meetings of the City of Casey is that we will, as best as possible, meet in person, subject to government health orders and other logistical aspects. But noting that this afternoon's meeting, there are other factors which have contributed to this being a 2/3 virtual meeting. But whilst we are passing the governance rules for public exhibition, as Mr Belmar has articulated, it extends also to council library corporations, and we do want the community to be engaged in the process so that we can again meet their expectations. But it is important, particularly for rural councils, to have flexibility in the way that they conduct their meetings. Sometimes travelling great distances for council meetings is challenging, but I do want to conclude again stating that our very strong preference is to meet in person. Where that is not possible, we will make arrangements consistent with these proposed governance rules and if subsequently adopted at a future council meeting and there is a degree of permanency, they will be used only in very limiting circumstances. So I do add those comments to yours and Mr. Belmar's comments, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And yes, certainly our preference is, as it has been when we've been able to be face-to-face and welcome the community into the gallery, which Mr. Belmar is doing on his own this afternoon. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is road discontinuance, Soldiers Road, Clyde North. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move that recommendation as put, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Invite you to speak to your motion.
Chair, this is a procedural motion to consider the discontinuance of the section of road at Soldiers Road in Clyde North, and the recommendation in two parts is to commence the statutory process for, as I said, the discontinuance. The details on the attached plan required by sections 206, 207A, 223, and item 3, section 10 of the LGA 1989 as the applicable legislation in this case. And furthermore, we are obviously going to be considering any submissions lodged in response to the public notice under section 223 of, again, the 1989 LGA to determine the future council meetings. This is subject to a piece of land near the corner of Thompson's Road in Clyde North. A request was received from the Victorian School Building Authority to discontinue part of the road in order for the road to be consolidated into the development of an abutting school site. And we have discussed that site separately and in different environments. It is a road that's owned by the state government. Whilst council is the responsible road authority and do have responsibility for maintaining it as an unsealed road, if the road is discontinued as per the request from the VSBA, the land will revert to the Crown and council will not have any ability to sell the land. The alternative proposal is that an access road will be constructed and included abutting the current road, and that will be within the VSBA site and will give access to the site, and will also create in the future more usable access point to the school. And the recommendation from council officers, and the subsequent recommendation we're adopting tonight, is that we do believe this proposal is in the best interest of the community, particularly to ensure the smooth development of the school site and the future smooth use of the site accordingly. With those words, Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, anything to add?
No, I have nothing to add to Mr. Boardman's comments other than to confirm I've read the papers. I am satisfied myself that the appropriate statutory work has been undertaken to put this on exhibition, and with those comments I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. As you said, this is also the beginning of the process. All those in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is Amendment C275 to the Casey Planning Scheme, review of the planning framework for the Cranbourne Major Activity Centre. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move this.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
I will second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight I am moving a recommendation which is in 6 parts, and importantly, many of those are statutorily. Well, they're all statutorily required, but they're really procedural. But at the nub of what we're moving tonight is that the Council asked the Minister of Planning to adopt a new policy, a new planning framework for the Cranbourne Major Activity Centre. This is a massive piece of work that's been undertaken by our officers, and I commend them for the work that's occurred. Major activity centre planning, apart from all the very important work that all councils do, this is the one that ensures in many respects that the community gets the best experience when they leave their home and go to an area where they expect to be able to undertake a number of activities, including shopping, seeing a doctor, catching a bus, going to the library. This is how that's achieved, because strategic planners think carefully about how to ensure that in the future those activities are able to be undertaken in one precinct. And as I started, I commend the work of the council officers in this. I note that when this piece of work was put to exhibition, there were 5 submissions. They've been considered. A planning panel hearing was proposed, but ultimately the panel work was done on the papers. What that means is that, in many respects, the panel was satisfied that the work done by council met the requirements achieved the satisfaction of the panel to ensure that all the correct principles of strategic planning had been identified and achieved. And I am very happy to move this motion, and if I can just complete my comments by just noting from the panel report the following. The Cranbourne Structure Plan provides overarching principles for the growth and development of the Cranbourne MAC. The vision for the MAC is the following. The Cranbourne MAC is a centre of choice, establishing itself as a regionally significant urban and civic destination. Innovation and growth are at the heart of providing a diversity of jobs, entertainment, transport, services, places and spaces which meet the needs of residents and the wider community, set within a landscaped environment that draws inspiration from the local area. And that excerpt from this report really, to me, sums up what we're doing tonight. We're putting forward a vision for the Cranbourne MAC, and with those comments, I am happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. As you've said, this is the end of the process. Mr. Boardman, I invite you to speak to your seconding motion.
Yes, indeed, Chair. It is. It has been quite a journey since at least 2011, as described in the 6 attachments, being the Casey Complex Structure Plan 2011, the Cranbourne Town Centre Plan 2011, the updated plan from 2017, the MAC Structure Plan, and then the panel report and the case for adoption, as Mr. Belmar has described. It should be noted, Chair, that in May we as a panel did visit the Cranbourne Activity Centre and did conduct quite a detailed inspection of the area, with a particular emphasis on transport infrastructure and connectivity. And whilst we note that there had been substantial development within the Cranbourne MAC over several years, if not decades now, what has been missing has been that interconnectivity, particularly as Mr. Belmar has articulated, to provide the best visitation experience, so that access, transport, so connectivity, parking, amenity, safety, retail and service diversification and all of the other aspects that goes into creating a prosperous, sustainable and positive experience is now articulated through the coordination of a very long and involved process that has culminated in the Cranbourne Major Activity Structure Plan for 2020. Whilst the panel has identified the long-term community benefits, which we are certainly in agreement, it could be argued, Chair, that the hard work actually starts now, that those recommendations need to be put into action, that there does need to be further long-going and extensive engagement with all facets of the community, particularly the development community, to ensure that the priorities and the goals are met. And that also, very importantly, includes the state governments as one of the key stakeholders within this overall structure plan to deal with a number of ongoing public transport challenges in the area, particularly the extension of the train line and the development and improvement of bus interchange and other transport and logistic infrastructure requirements. So whilst this has been an extensive process over many, many years now, and one which has been a particular focus of us and previous councils, it is testament to the professionalism of council officers involved that all aspects have been considered thoroughly. There has been endorsement from the panel, and that the view of the council now is to get on with the work to make the Cranbourne Activity Centre a much better and more pleasant and sustainable centre for all members of the municipality and community in the future, and that's exactly what we will be seeking to do. So with those words, Chair, I do endorse your comments, endorse the comments of Mr Belmar, endorse the reports for action accordingly, and look forward to ongoing progress reports to us in the future.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 is contract variation number 543, and it's with respect to the construction of 2 recreation reserves at Clyde Recreation Reserve and Clyde and Lockhaven Reserve. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move that recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to your motion.
Chair, it's a very brief procedural motion, as you've identified, dealing with the Clive and Lockhaven recreational reserves. It's the construction of additional facilities, and the recommendation is to increase amounts that can be added to the contract contingency. These, as we understand, having reviewed the report of the documents, can be accommodated with existing project budgets for the 2 reserves, and subsequently can be accommodated in council's capital works budgets. This is a situation that council has finds itself in across the state, and if not the country at the moment, that cost variations are becoming increasingly prevalent, albeit this particular variation is at the lesser side, thankfully. But nonetheless, we do need to take into consideration feedback from the developer community, particularly those that have been successful in awarding these, successful in obtaining these contracts through open market exercises, and where variations are necessary. Council's role is to consider all aspects of the variations diligently and under the best principles of good governance, and to ensure that we can achieve the best community outcome in the process, and that this is an example of that. And whilst, as I said, that those contingencies are within the project budgets and being accommodated within our capital works projects for 2021, 22 and 22, 23, it is nonetheless a process we do from a procedural basis need to adhere to. So, I am pleased to move the recommendation as put, and I'm satisfied that that process has met all of our obligations from a governance and good financial management standpoint.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. Just some brief comments that I have read the report and satisfied myself that it's an appropriate contingency increase that should be made. I note that this motion is required because of the value of the original contract, and I thank the council officers for their ongoing excellent work in always supervising carefully these contracts and advising us when these sorts of motions need to occur. And with those comments, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Indeed, I agree, it is an ongoing concern, but it's something that we are, as a government organisation, in very good company with both our colleagues across the local government sector, but also state and federal governments. I note that officers are taking every cautionary step that they are able to ensure that projects are fully assessed, that estimated prices are reviewed at the latest stages, and that it's going to be incumbent on council in its decision making to review our capital commitments ongoing. It's going to be a fairly difficult road ahead with the construction industry and the pressures they're under in terms of component supply, etc. With those comments, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Our last item in open council this afternoon is item 5.7, Suburbs Fund, and this seeks endorsement of a number of projects to submit for funding. Do I have a mover for the report?
Yes, I'll move this.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and a seconder.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. By this motion, I'm moving a motion to endorse projects for the Growing Suburbs Fund. I note from the officer's report that 3 projects have been identified: the Hampton Park Community House renewal, the Fairhaven Children's Centre renewal, and the Cams Road Maternal and Child Health Care Centre renewal. The total of those projects is set out in the papers, and the commitment of rates is also there set out. What is important about the projects that have been identified is that they are shovel ready, to use that phrase, and it's only projects of that type that will be considered for grants, as I'm advised. I want to thank the members of council, the staff who are always maintaining our book of works ready to go, so that when opportunities like this are available, we are always ready to put forward projects that are appropriately able to be funded. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Any comments, Mr. Boardman, in your seconding?
Only to completely endorse the 3 priorities, one being the Hampton Park Community House renewal, 2 the Fairhaven Children's Centre renewal, and 3 the Cams Road Maternal and Child Health Centre renewal. The applications have been thoroughly considered by the team and comply with the requirements under the fund itself, and one that, if successful, we will be very pleased to announce to the community and hopefully update the facilities accordingly. So I do endorse the report as put and endorse the words of my colleague, Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and we're appreciative this is a state government funding program, and I know that officers are always very keen to submit a number of projects to this funding. It's been an ongoing funding source that is really a very helpful one to council. So I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Move on to item 6, which is consideration of reports of committees, and I simply note the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee of the 24th of May and the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7 is petitions, and we have one petition received for this council meeting with respect to an abandoned building site at 47 Wintersun Road, Berwick, which has been submitted by, and this is a very difficult surname and I will get it wrong, Octavian Gegachikanu, and it's signed by 7 signatories. The petition summary, and I'll be very brief, it is more extensive than I'm reading, but in the council papers it's more extensive. It's to bring to council's attention the sensitive situation of the building process at 47 Wintersun Road, Berwick. It's been a site that's abandoned for 7 to 10 years and is causing a disturbance from the whole street. And the petition notes that there are other sites in the street that are likely to undergo building and seeking council's consideration with respect to that. The recommendation is that the manager planning and building write to the head signatory and provide a response to the matters raised in the petition. Do I have a mover for that recommendation?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and a seconder.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, did you want to say anything about this petition?
Just very briefly, Chair, I want to thank the petitioners for reaching out to council on this occasion, and I am confident that the manager planning and building will take the appropriate steps in addressing the concerns and taking any steps that are available appropriately to council.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, anything to add?
I just note the concerns of the petitioner and Mr Belmar and your comments that we will be taking the requisite follow-up and responding accordingly.
Thank you. Can I have a vote to receive the petition? All in favour? Thank you. Carried. Item 8 is urgent business, and there are no urgent business items for the council meeting this afternoon. Item 9, we move to closed council. There is one closed council item for consideration, and it's a confidential matter. So pursuant to Section 3 of the Local Government Act 2020, the Chief Executive has determined the reports listed for this item and their attachments are confidential in accordance with Section 3 of the Act, that being that the council business information being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. So that leaves me one more formality this afternoon, and that's declare this meeting closed. Thank you to those who've attended in person and those who've observed online and those who've submitted and participated in the council meeting this afternoon. I bid you good afternoon.